The gentle current was dying. Scholar Priss could feel it in the way the ship trembled, in the flickering lights above her head, and in the cold fear spreading through her crew. The science vessel had been traveling through the outer edges of the system when the engine exploded without warning. Now they drifted in the empty darkness of space with no way to move and no way to call for help from their own people. Priss stood in the command center and watched her crew work. They were beings with 4 arms and large compound eyes that reflected the dim emergency lights. Their antennae twitched with stress as they tried to repair systems that were beyond saving. The chief engineer had already given her the terrible news. They had maybe 2 days of life support remaining. After that, they would all freeze in the void. Scholar Priss, her communications officer, called out, "We have one option remaining." Priss already knew what he meant: the galactic emergency frequency. It was a channel that any spacefaring species could detect. If they sent a distress signal on that frequency, anyone might respond. Anyone at all. "Do it," Priss said. Her voice was steady even though her hearts were racing. The signal went out into the darkness. It carried their location, their situation, and their desperate hope that someone would come. Priss settled into her command chair and waited. She tried not to think about who might answer. Far across the galaxy, on a small blue planet called Earth, a technician named Lucy Harper was having a quiet night shift. She worked at the Deep Space Monitoring Station in Nevada, a facility built into the desert mountains. Her job was to listen to the stars and wait for something interesting to happen. Most nights, nothing did. Tonight was different. Her console lit up with an alert. Lucy leaned forward and studied the data streaming across her screen. It was a distress signal, clearly artificial, coming from a system called. She had never seen anything like it before. The signal was not human, but it followed universal mathematical patterns that made its meaning clear. Someone out there needed help. Lucy picked up her phone and called Commander Daniel Brooks at the United Space Command headquarters in Colorado. It took only minutes for her call to reach the right people. Within the hour, a decision was made. The ESV Steady Hand was the closest human vessel to the system. It was a medium-sized exploration ship with a crew of 42, designed for long-range missions and first contact situations. Captain Grace Miller received her orders as she sat in her ready room, reviewing reports from her science team. "A distress signal," she said aloud, reading the message twice. "Non-human origin. We are authorized to respond and render assistance." Grace was a woman in her early 40s with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. She had spent 20 years in space, working her way up from a young pilot to the captain of her own ship. She had trained for first contact her entire career, but she never truly believed it would happen during her lifetime. She walked onto the bridge and addressed her crew. "Set course for the system, maximum speed. We have people out there who need our help." Her crew responded without hesitation. The Steady Hand turned toward distant stars and jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Earth far behind. Back on the gentle current, Priss received the response to her distress call. Her communications officer read the message aloud, and the entire bridge fell silent. The species responding to their signal was called human. They came from a planet called Earth. They would arrive in approximately 6 hours. Priss felt her blood turn cold. Everyone knew about humans. Every species in the galaxy knew about humans. The stories had been passed down for generations, recorded in databases that stretched back thousands of years. Humans came from a death world, a planet covered in poison oceans and filled with dangerous predators. The humans themselves were predators, hunters who chased their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They consumed the flesh of other creatures. They waged endless wars against each other. Their bodies could survive injury that would kill most species instantly. The ancient Dominion had visited Earth long ago and classified its inhabitants as a galactic threat. They warned all civilized species to stay away from the blue planet and its terrifying natives. For thousands of years, that warning had kept humans isolated, unknown, and feared. Now they were coming. Scholar Priss, one of her crew members, whispered, "What do we do?" Priss looked around at her people. They were scientists and engineers, not warriors. They had no weapons capable of fighting off a human attack. If the stories were true, the humans would board their ship, kill them all, and take whatever they wanted. But what choice did they have? They could not run. They could not hide. They could only wait and hope that death would be quick. "We prepare ourselves," Priss said quietly. "We face whatever comes with dignity." The hours passed slowly. They tried to continue their repair work, but their hands trembled and their minds wandered. Some of them prayed to old gods. Others simply sat in silence, holding each other for comfort. The youngest member of the crew stayed close to Pris. He was barely an adult by standards, and his fear was obvious in the way his antenna lay flat against his head. "Scholar," he said softly, "are humans really as terrible as the stories say?" Pris did not know how to answer. She had never met a human. She had only heard the same stories as everyone else. But she was a scientist, and scientists were supposed to question everything. "I do not know," she admitted. "Perhaps we will find out together." The sensors detected the human ship an hour before it arrived. The steady hand dropped out of faster-than-light speed and approached slowly, its lights shining bright against the darkness. It was smaller than Pris expected, not a warship but something more modest. Still, she knew that size meant nothing when dealing with death. The communications console lit up with an incoming message. A human voice filled the bridge, translated by the ship's computer into words they could understand. "This is Captain Grace Miller of the ESV Steady Hand. We received your distress signal, and we are here to help. Please respond with your status and let us know what you need." The voice was calm and clear. There was no threat in it, no demand for surrender, just an offer of help. Pris stood frozen for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and activated her own communication system. "This is Scholar Pris of the science vessel Gentle Current. We surrender. Please, we ask only that you make our deaths quick." There was a long pause. When the human spoke again, her voice sounded confused. "I am sorry, I do not understand. Did you say surrender? We are not here to hurt you. We are here to help. Can you tell us what is wrong with your ship?" Pris did not know what to say. This was not how the stories went. This was not what she expected at all. Captain Grace Miller stared at her communications console with a look of complete confusion on her face. The alien vessel had just offered to surrender. They had asked for quick deaths. Grace had trained for first contact scenarios for 20 years, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. "Lieutenant Park," she said, turning to her security officer, "what do you make of that?" Park was a tall man in his early 30s with a quiet demeanor and sharp eyes. He stood beside the tactical station with his arms crossed, frowning at that showed the damaged alien vessel. "They sound terrified, Captain. Whatever they think we are, it is not good." Grace nodded slowly. She activated the communications channel again and spoke in the gentlest voice she could manage. "Scholar Pris, I want to be very clear. We are not here to harm you. We are here because you called for help, and helping people in trouble is what we do. Can you please tell us about the damage to your ship so we can assist you?" There was a long silence. Grace could imagine the aliens on the other end of the channel trying to understand what was happening. Finally, the voice of Scholar Pris returned. "Our engine has failed. We have critical damage to several systems. Our life support will fail within 2 days. We have no way to repair the damage ourselves." Grace turned to her chief engineer, Sam Torres. He was a stocky man with graying hair and hands that were permanently stained with engine grease. Sam had been fixing ships since before Grace was born, and there was nothing mechanical that could defeat him. "Sam, can we help them?" Sam was already studying the sensor readings on his console. He scratched his chin and nodded. "I need to see it up close, but from what I can tell, they have a ruptured plasma conduit and damage to their power distribution system. If they have the spare parts, I can probably fix it. If not, we might be able to adapt some of our own equipment." Grace smiled. "That is what I wanted to hear." She turned back to the communications console. "Scholar Pris, we have engineers who can help repair your ship. We also have a doctor who can treat any injuries your crew may have suffered. With your permission, we would like to send a team aboard your vessel to assist you." Another long pause. When Pris spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. "You may board us, we will not resist." Grace sighed. These aliens were convinced they were about to be attacked, and nothing she said seemed to change their minds. She would have to show them the truth through actions instead of words. "Listen carefully, everyone," she said to her bridge crew. "These aliens are afraid of us. I do not know why, but we need to show them that their fear is misplaced. When we board their ship, we move slowly. We speak softly. We smile, but not too much because we do not know how they interpret facial expressions. We treat them the way we would want to be treated if we were the ones who were scared and helpless. Understood?" Her crew nodded. They were good people, all of them. Grace trusted them to represent humanity well. The boarding party consisted of Park, Sam Torres, Dr. Cole, and two other crew members. They took a small shuttle across the gap between the two ships and docked with the gentle current. Went first, his hand resting on his sidearm but not drawing it. He wanted to be ready for trouble, but he did not want to cause it. The airlock opened, and stepped onto an alien vessel for the first time in human history. The corridor was dark and cold. The walls were made of some kind of smooth material that reflected the dim emergency lights. The air smelled strange, like metal and something faintly sweet. Moved forward slowly, his footsteps echoing in the silence. He turned a corner and found them. They were huddled together in a group, pressed against the far wall of a large room. They were beings, about the size of humans but thinner, with 4 arms and large eyes that caught the light. Their antennae were pressed flat against their heads, and their bodies trembled visibly. They were terrified. Stopped walking immediately. He raised his hand slowly, showing that he held no weapon. Behind him, Sam and the others did the same. "Hello," said softly. "We are here to help you. We are not going to hurt anyone." One of them stepped forward. She was taller than the others and carried herself with the bearing of a leader despite her obvious fear. Guessed this was Scholar Pris. "Why?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed her confusion. "Why would you help us? You do not know us. We have nothing to offer you. Why would humans travel across space to save strangers?" Thought about the question. It was a good question, actually. He tried to find the right words. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "That is all the reason we need." Pris stared at him for a long moment. Then she made a gesture with her upper arms that might have been a sign of acceptance or surrender. Could not tell which. "Our engine room is this way. I will take your engineer there now." Sam stepped forward with a friendly nod. "Lead the way. Let us see what we are working with." The group split up. Sam followed Pris and several engineers toward the damaged sections of the ship, asked to see any injured crew members, and a nervous guided her toward what passed for a medical bay. Stayed in the main gathering area, watching over the frightened aliens and trying to make them feel safe. A young approached him cautiously. This one was smaller than the others, with bright patterns on his exoskeleton that marked him as young. His antennae twitched with curiosity even as his body language showed fear. "You are human," the young one said. It was a statement, not a question. "Yes, my name is. What is your name?" "I am called." The young tilted his head, studying with his large compound eyes. "The stories say humans are monsters, killers, death who feel no pain and show no mercy, but you do not look like a monster." Smiled gently. "We are not monsters. We are just people, same as you. We have families and friends and dreams. We feel pain and fear and love. We came here because helping others is the right thing to do." Moved a little closer. "Why do the stories say such terrible things about you?" "I do not know," admitted. "But stories are not always true. Sometimes you have to meet someone yourself to know who they really are." In the engine room, Sam Torres was covered in grease up to his elbows and happier than he had been in months. The engine was different from human designs, but physics was physics. The basic principles were the same everywhere in the universe. "Hand me that connector," he said to an engineer who was watching him work. The alien hesitated, then passed him the tool. Sam nodded his thanks and continued working. In the medical bay, Cole was treating a with burns on 2 of his arms. She worked carefully, applying cooling gel and bandages while explaining everything she was doing. Her patient watched her with wide eyes, unable to believe that a human was touching him gently instead of tearing him apart. "You will be fine," said warmly. "The burns are not deep. You should heal completely in a few weeks." They made a sound that might have been gratitude, smiled and moved on to her next patient. On the bridge of the steady hand, Captain Grace Miller watched the reports coming in from her team. Everything was going well. Her people were doing exactly what she had asked of them. They were showing who humans really were. She just hoped it would be enough. Sam Torres had been an engineer for 35 years. He had fixed ships in the middle of asteroid fields, repaired engines while under enemy fire, and once kept a dying reactor stable for 18 hours with nothing but duct tape and determination. But this was the first time he had ever worked on an alien engine, and he was loving every minute of it. The engineers watched him with a mixture of fear and fascination. At first, they kept their distance, pressing themselves against the walls whenever Sam moved too quickly. But as the hours passed and Sam continued to work calmly and competently, they began to relax. One of them, a tall with silver markings on his carapace, even started helping. "Pass me that plasma coupler," Sam said, pointing at a device on a nearby shelf. They hesitated for only a moment before grabbing the coupler and handing it to Sam. Their hands touched briefly during the exchange, and they flinched, but Sam just smiled and nodded his thanks before turning back to his work. "You know," Sam said conversationally, "this engine design is really clever. The way you route power through these secondary conduits is more efficient than anything we have back home. My people could learn a lot from you." The with silver markings tilted his head. "You think our technology is clever?" "Absolutely. Different does not mean worse. Sometimes different means better." Sam tightened a connection and checked his readings. "There, that should hold. Now let us look at your power distribution system." In the medical bay, Dr. Cole was finishing her rounds. She had treated 7 for various injuries, mostly burns and cuts from the initial explosion. None of the injuries were life-threatening, but all of them required care. Had worked slowly and gently, explaining each step of her treatment and answering every question her patients asked. They were amazed by her. They had expected a predator, a monster who would cause pain without remorse. Instead, they found a healer who went out of her way to minimize their discomfort and who seemed genuinely happy when they began to recover. "Thank you," one of her patients said quietly. He was an older with faded coloring on his exoskeleton. "I did not expect kindness from a human." Paused in her work and looked at him with soft eyes. "Kindness is what we do," she said simply. "It is who we are." The old made a sound that was learning to recognize as a sign of thoughtfulness. "Perhaps the stories were wrong about your people." Perhaps they were. Park had spent most of his time with the young who seemed endlessly curious about humans. Asked questions constantly, wanting to know everything about Earth and its inhabitants. Answered as best he could, describing blue oceans and green forests and cities filled with millions of people living together. "Do humans really eat the flesh of other creatures?" Asked, his antennae twitching with something between horror and curiosity. Considered how to answer. "Some of us do, others do not. We have many choices about what we eat, but we do not eat intelligent beings if that is what you are worried about." Relax slightly, that is good to know. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm that echoed through the ship. Red lights began flashing in the corridors, and crew members rushed past with panic in their movements. "What is happening?" asked. An engineer stopped long enough to answer. "Radiation leak in Section 7. The containment system is failing. If we do not seal it, the radiation will spread through the entire ship." Felt his stomach tighten. He had trained for situations like this. He knew what needed to be done. "Show me," he said. The engineer led him through the ship at a run, followed close behind, refusing to be left alone. They reached Section 7 in minutes and found a group of standing in the corridor, unable to approach the damaged area. The radiation levels beyond the sealed door were already dangerously high. "We cannot survive in there long enough to seal the breach," the engineer said. "Our bodies are too sensitive to radiation. We would die before we finished the repair." Looked at the radiation readings on a nearby console. The levels were high, but not immediately lethal to humans. His species had evolved on a planet with higher background radiation than most worlds. He could survive in there long enough to do the job. "I will go," he said. They stared at him in disbelief. "You would die for us?" the engineer asked. "I do not plan to die, but I can survive in there longer than you can. Show me what needs to be done." The engineer quickly explained the repair, memorized the steps, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The radiation warning screamed at him as he stepped through, but he ignored it. He had work to do. The next few minutes were some of the longest of his life. The radiation burned his skin and made his eyes water. His body screamed at him to retreat, to save himself, but kept working, his hands moving through the repair steps even as his strength began to fade. Finally, the breach was sealed, stumbled back through the door and collapsed against the corridor wall. His skin was red and blistered and every breath hurt, but he had done it. The ship was safe. Knelt beside him, his young face twisted with concern. "Why?" he asked. "Why would you hurt yourself for us?" Looked up at him through pain-blurred eyes. "Because you needed help. That is what humans do." Dr. Cole arrived within minutes, summoned by a frantic crew member. She immediately began treating radiation burns, working quickly and efficiently while medical staff watched and assisted. For the first time, The two species worked together as equals, united by their desire to help someone who had sacrificed himself for others. Scholar Priss watched from the doorway, her compound eyes fixed on the injured human and the crew members working to save him. She had spent her entire life believing that humans were monsters. Now, she was watching one of them suffer because he had chosen to protect her people. Everything she knew was wrong. She stepped forward and knelt beside unconscious form. With one of her hands, she touched his shoulder gently, a gesture of respect that meant more in culture than any words could express. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for showing us who you truly are." Sam Torres arrived a few minutes later, his face pale with worry. He had heard about what happened over the ship's communication system and had rushed to find his friend. "He is going to be fine," assured him. "The exposure was significant but not fatal. He will need time to recover, but he will recover." Sam let out a breath he had not realized he was holding. "That is for you, always jumping into danger to help someone else." Around them, watched with new understanding in their eyes. The stories they had heard about humans were falling apart, replaced by the truth they were seeing with their own eyes. Humans were not monsters. They were heroes. Woke up in the medical bay with bandages covering most of his arms and chest. The pain had faded to a dull ache, thanks to whatever medication Dr. Cole had given him. He blinked slowly and tried to remember where he was. "You are awake." His voice came from somewhere to his left. The young was sitting on the floor beside his bed, his antenna perked up with relief. "The doctor said you would sleep for many hours, but I wanted to be here when you woke." Managed a weak smile. "How long was I out?" "Nearly half a day. The repairs on our ship are almost complete. Your engineer Sam is very skilled." Nodded and slowly pushed himself into a sitting position. His body protested the movement, but he ignored it. He had survived worse. The door to the medical bay opened, and Scholar Priss entered. She moved differently now, noticed. The fear that had marked her every movement when they first arrived was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like respect. "Lieutenant Park," she said formally, "I came to thank you again for what you did. Your actions saved my ship and my crew. We are in your debt." "You do not owe me anything," replied. "I did what anyone would do." Priss made a sound that was learning to recognize as laughter, though it carried a bitter edge. "No, Lieutenant, that is precisely the point. Not anyone would do what you did. According to everything we knew about humans, you should have left us to die or killed us yourselves. Instead, you risked your life to save strangers from a species you had never met. That is not normal. That is extraordinary." Did not know how to respond to that, so he simply nodded. A few hours later, the main repairs were complete, and the gentle current was no longer in immediate danger. Captain Grace Miller came aboard to meet with Scholar Priss personally, and the two leaders shared a meal together in what passed for the dining hall. The meal was strange but pleasant. They ate a paste made from processed nutrients, while the humans had brought sandwiches from their own ship. Both sides shared their food freely, curious about what the other species consumed. "I must ask you something," Priss said finally, setting down her eating implement and looking directly at Grace. "And I need you to be honest with me." "Of course." Why did you come all this way to help us? The galaxy has known about humans for thousands of years. Every species has heard the warnings. Humans are death, predators, violent and aggressive and dangerous. Yet everything you have shown us is the opposite of those stories. What is the truth about humanity?" Grace took a moment to consider her answer. This was the question she had been waiting for, the question that might change everything. "The truth is that we had no idea anyone else existed until about 100 years ago. We developed technology to travel between stars only a few decades ago. In all that time, we have never conquered anyone. We have never attacked another species. We have been trying to make peaceful contact with the galaxy for years, but no one ever answered our calls. Until now." Priss absorbed this information in silence. Her compound eyes blinked slowly as she processed what she was hearing. "But the Dominion records," she said. "They are thousands of years old. They describe humans as a threat to galactic civilization." Grace shook her head. "We do not know anything about the Dominion, but if they visited Earth thousands of years ago, they would have found primitive humans living in small tribes. We had no technology, no understanding of the wider universe. Whatever they saw, whatever they recorded, it was not who we are today." Sam Torres spoke up from his seat nearby. "Think about it from their perspective. They land on a planet and find a species that hunts for food, that has sharp teeth and forward-facing eyes like a predator, that lives on a world with poison oceans and dangerous animals. They probably took one look at us and decided we were too dangerous to contact. So they warned everyone else to stay away, Pris finished. And that warning became our only knowledge of humanity. That is our best guess, Grace confirmed. Your species and every other species in the galaxy have been avoiding us based on the fears of people who never even spoke to us. You have been afraid of a monster that does not exist. Had been listening to the conversation with wide eyes. Now he spoke up, his young voice filled with wonder. Then humans are not killers. Who was well enough to join the meal answered him. We can be when we have to be. We are not perfect. We have wars and violence just like any species probably does. But we also have love and kindness and the desire to help others. We are complicated just like everyone else. But you feel fear, Prest. I saw your hands shake before you entered the radiation. You were afraid, but you went anyway. Why? Smiled at the young. Being brave does not mean being unafraid. It means being afraid and doing the right thing anyway. We feel fear just like you do, but we do not let fear control us. Pris was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she had learned. Her entire worldview had been shattered in a single day. Everything she had been taught about humans was wrong. The monsters she had feared her whole life were actually kind, brave, compassionate beings who had traveled across space to save strangers. I have made a decision, she announced finally. When we return to space, I will tell everyone what happened here. I will share what we have learned about humanity. The truth must be known. Grace reached across the table and extended her hand. It was a human gesture of agreement and friendship. Pris hesitated for only a moment before reaching out with one of her own hands and grasping it. Thank you, Grace said. That is all we have ever wanted, a chance to be known for who we really are. You have earned that chance, Pris replied. You have earned it 100 times over. The meal continued late into the night cycle, with humans and talking and laughing and sharing stories. The fear that had dominated their first meeting was completely gone, replaced by genuine friendship and mutual respect. Sat beside for most of the evening, asking endless questions about Earth and humanity. Answered them all patiently, happy to share his culture with someone so eager to learn. Will I ever see you again? Asked as the evening wound down. Put his hand on shoulder, a gesture the young had learned meant friendship among humans. I hope so, said honestly. The galaxy is smaller than it used to be. Maybe someday our peoples will be allies. Maybe someday you can visit Earth and see it for yourself. Santina perked up with excitement. I would like that very much. Around them, humans and continued to talk, building bridges that would change the galaxy forever. The morning of departure came too quickly. Sam Torres spent the final hours running system checks with the engineers, making sure every repair would hold. He had grown to respect these aliens, and they had grown to trust him. Before leaving, he exchanged technical specifications and communication frequencies with his counterparts. If you ever have engine trouble again, Sam told them with a grin, you know who to call. The engineers made sounds of amusement. One of them, the tall one with silver markings who had helped Sam the most, stepped forward and pressed something into his hand. It was a small tool of design, beautifully crafted and clearly valuable. A gift, they explained, so you will remember us. Sam closed his fingers around the tool and nodded. I could never forget you, thank you. Dr. Cole had a similar farewell in the medical bay. She had spent hours teaching medics about human medical techniques, and they had shared their own knowledge in return. The exchange of information would benefit both species for years to come. Your medicine is remarkable, one of the healers told her. You heal with compassion as much as with technology. Smiled warmly. We learned long ago that kindness is the best medicine. I am glad we could share that with you. She left behind a supply of medical equipment that they could adapt for their own use. In return, they gave her samples of healing compounds that human scientists would study for decades. On the bridge of the gentle current, Captain Grace Miller and Scholar Pris stood together, preparing for their final conversation. Both leaders had changed during their time together. They had started as strangers from different worlds, bound by fear and misunderstanding. They were leaving as friends and allies. The repairs are complete, Pris announced. My ship is fully functional again thanks to your people. We can return home. That is good news, Grace replied. What will you do when you get there? Pris turned to face the human captain directly. Her compound eyes reflected the lights of the bridge, and her posture carried a determination that had not been there before. I will tell the truth. I will broadcast our recordings to every ship and station in space. I will show them what really happened here, how humans came to save us when no one else would. I will challenge the ancient lies about your species and demand that our people see you for who you truly are. Grace felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. That means more to us than you can know. We have been alone for so long, feared by a galaxy that never gave us a chance. If your people are willing to listen, maybe others will follow. They will listen, Pris said confidently. When they see the evidence, when they hear the testimony of my crew, they will have no choice but to question everything they thought they knew. Approached one last time as the human crew prepared to return to the steady hand. The young was holding something tightly in his hands, as if afraid to let it go. I do not want you to leave, admitted. His antenna drooped with sadness. You are the first human I have ever met. What if I never meet another? Knelt down to be at eye level with the young alien. You will meet many more humans, I am sure of it. The galaxy is changing. What happened here is just the beginning. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small metal pin. It was his service badge, the symbol of his rank and position aboard the steady hand. He had earned it through years of hard work and dedication. Now he pressed it into his hands. This is my promise to you, said. Keep this, and remember that somewhere in the galaxy, a human is thinking about you and hoping you are well. When our peoples finally meet again, officially and openly, I want to be there. I want to see you standing among the who welcomed humanity into the galactic community. Clutched the pin against his chest. I will keep it always, and I will remember you. I will remember everything you taught me. They shared a moment of connection that transcended species and culture. Then stood, nodded once, and walked toward the airlock where his were waiting. The human boarding party returned to the steady hand, and the two ships separated for the first time since the rescue began. They drifted apart slowly, maintaining communication until the last possible moment. Steady hand, this is Gentle Current, Pris's voice came through the speakers. Before we depart, I wish to share something with you, a recording I have made for my people. Grace nodded to her communications officer. Go ahead, Scholar Pris, we are listening. Pris's voice changed, becoming more formal as she began her broadcast. To all species who receive this message. My name is Scholar Pris, captain of the science vessel Gentle Current. 2 days ago, my ship suffered a catastrophic failure that left us stranded in space. We sent a distress signal on the galactic emergency frequency, not knowing who would respond. The species that answered our call was the one we feared most, humans. Everything we knew about humans was wrong. They did not attack us. They did not harm us. They did not demand anything in return for their help. They came to us as friends and saviors. They repaired our ship, healed our injured, and risked their own lives to protect us. One human, a lieutenant named Park, entered a radiation-contaminated section of our vessel to seal a breach that threatened us all. He suffered serious injuries, saving lives. He did this without hesitation, without asking for reward, simply because we needed help. The ancient warnings about humanity were based on fear and misunderstanding. The humans I met are kind, brave, and compassionate. They deserve our respect and our friendship. I urge all species who hear this message, to reconsider what you think you know about Earth and its people. The monsters we feared do not exist. The humans are not our enemies. They are the allies we never knew we had. I hope that someday soon, we will welcome them into the galactic community as the friends they have proven themselves to be. Gentle Current out. The recording ended. Silence filled the bridge of the steady hand for a long moment. Then Grace smiled and keyed her own microphone. Thank you, Scholar Pris. That was beautiful. It was only the truth, Captain Miller. Good luck on your journey. I hope we meet again. So do I. Safe travels, Gentle Current. The ship turned and accelerated toward distant stars. Within moments, it jumped to faster-than-light speed and disappeared from sensors. The steady hand was alone again in the darkness of space. But not for long. Grace's communication officer looked up from his console with surprise on his face. Captain, we are receiving a priority message from Earth Command. Multiple distress signals have been detected across several systems. Other species are calling for help. Grace raised an eyebrow. Already, word travels fast. It appears that other ships were monitoring the same frequencies as the. They heard Scholar Priss's broadcast. They know that humans will actually help. Grace felt something warm and hopeful bloom in her chest. This was it. This was the beginning she had always dreamed of. Set a course for the nearest signal, she ordered. We have work to do. The steady hand turned toward new stars and new friends waiting to be made. Behind them, the message Scholar Priss had sent was spreading across the galaxy, carried by communication relays and passing ships. The truth about humanity was finally being told. Far away, on a ship heading home, held a small human badge in his hands and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, his friend was flying toward another rescue, another chance to show the galaxy who humans really were. Made a silent promise. He would never forget. And someday, when humans stood together as allies and friends, he would be there to welcome them, just as had promised. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had finally come home.